So let me address this Bible translation thing real quick. I actually was going to make a video to start this week about something else, but I'll answer your question, Kamika, and I figured this would be easier so I can fully explain my answer as opposed to texting it. Here's the thing. Those verses that are mentioned are not in your NIV or your ESV or your NLT or a couple other translations, and they actually have never been there. Here, or not since the last maybe 20 or 30 years, but here's why. Those when people translate the King James version, they use the most up to date and the oldest manuscripts of Scripture that they had at the time, and also translating into English was kind of hard, and so it wasn't a perfect translation by any stretch of the imagination, but it was very good, and for the most part, did a really good job of translating what people were trying to say. In years since then, I'm talking like maybe the last 50, 40, 50 years, we've found more versions of the Bible that actually are older than the manuscripts that people use to translate the King James Version. What that means is that people then decided to translate into English, into more contemporary English, but also using the older manuscripts, because if it's older, then there's the belief that it's more accurate or closer to original text and things like that. And it's also believed that some of those verses that are mentioned or that are listed there that aren't included in the NIV or the ESV or what have you were verses that scribes and translators over the years, Greek, Hebrew, or otherwise, added for context or to add cultural references to things. For example, there's a verse that talks about the pool of Bethesda and the angel troubling the water. If you look in the NIV or you look in the ESV, you will not find a mention of that, and partially because that supposedly was part of an old wives' tale related to the pool of Bethesda, and that's part of the reason why Jews shouldn't have been there, and part of the reason why the story that Jesus tells about healing the man makes more sense in terms of why Jesus didn't allow the man to get in the water and get dipped and all that good stuff, because technically it wasn't part of Jewish religion anyway. So what they wanted to do, or some of the writers apparently, the theory is that they added that verse so that people would understand why this man might want to be there at that pool at that particular time. Other things about the King James Version is that it is not a perfect translation by any stretch. There's a couple things that even in English don't really work. Like there's there's a verse in the King James that talks about they that wait upon the Lord shall mount up on wings as eagles, what have you. And we always think of the word wait there meaning to be patient. It doesn't mean that. It means to serve in the same way that a waiter serves a table. That is what it means to wait upon the Lord there. Another example of that is in Timothy, where he says, "Study to show thyself approved unto God, a work that need not be ashamed." Blah blah blah. The word study there does not mean study like study a book. Study means to follow or to live out or to be consistent or what have you. It doesn't mean to study in the way that we think of it. So with that being said, the King James is not perfect. No translation is perfect. You need to understand that you can choose to translate Hebrew and Greek and Aramaic in a couple different ways. You can translate it thought for thought, which is what the NIV does and the NLT tries to do so that you can understand it better. Or you can translate it word for word, which doesn't actually work all the time. And so you end up with weird, clunky sentences that don't always make sense. And so the New American Standard Version and the ESV version try their best to translate word for word. NIV, NLT try to translate thought for thought. And then you have something like the Holman, the HCSB, which does a good job of doing both, in my opinion, but it also leaves in those verses that are not in other manuscripts, but it puts them in brackets so that you know they are not found in every manuscript. I hope that clears your question about these translations. The issue with a lot of these things, if you notice, you don't ever really hear these arguments from really reputable scholars or really reputable Bible historians. And part of that's because a lot of times these rumors get started by people that really love the King James Version only, and they're very old school, and for whatever reason they feel like the King James Version was like directly translated from the Lord when nobody was speaking English back then anyway. So yeah, so just be careful. Don't listen to everything that you hear. And all the stuff I'm talking about, you can go look it up. You can go look up Bible translations. Find a good, solid Bible commentary. Find a good Bible study website. Talk to, find any kind of seminary type of resource you can find, and I guarantee you'll confirm what I've told you. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.